Okay, hello everyone, good evening. So my name is Venkatesh Chembrolu. So I'm coming from India, from an institute called Indian Institute of Technology at Mandi. It's in one of the northern states of India. And this concurrent session is titled Eastern and Global Approaches. And we all presume it must be approaches to consciousness. So we have 6 talks scheduled in this session. Every concrete session has 6 talks, so it will be 25 minutes long. 20-minute presentation and 5 minutes for Q&A. So we'll start with Gleb Sharygin. Right? He's going to talk about the strategy of resolving the mind-body problem in early Buddhism in light of John Searle's philosophy of mind and language. So, to Gleb.
Thank you. 1 second. So let me start. Okay, doesn't. Here, I think. Yes, but like this. Yes. Yes. 1 second. Can you help me? Maybe it's okay. It's okay like this. Sorry. Yeah.
You can.
So yes. My name is Gleb Sharygin. Hello, thank you very much for attending. So I'm an Indologist and Buddhist scholar from Munich. I work with ancient Indian texts, mostly ancient Indian Buddhist texts, but I'm also very interested in philosophy and philosophy of consciousness. That's why I chose this topic for today's talk. So first, let me ask you to imagine a triangle in your mind. Imagine a triangle. So, yes. Then try to think how this object exists, yeah? Where it exists, how it's possible to have this experience, and so on. Of course, we can say that it is some excitations in neuronal fields and so on, but these are 2 different objects, yes? The triangle that you just imagined and the excitations, the atoms, ultimately quarks and whatever. So these are 2 different objects, and this is one of the main position of John Searle, that there are irreducible subjective experiences which we cannot reduce to physical, chemical, and so on, properties of reality. Okay, so and now let me say a few words about the character of early Buddhist worldview. So early Buddhism is a very interesting tradition. I've been studying it for more than 25 years now, and the more I study, the less I understand, and more impressed by it. So it is unique in many ways. It's also very different from many other Indian traditions. First of all, it's an extremely subtle system which balances on the verge, on the edge of skepticism. And secondly, it addresses a wide spectrum of questions, questions like free will, the nature of individual, the structure of the world, and whatever, many other questions, yes. But nevertheless, some of the crucial philosophical questions are suspended, so to say, or kind of left unexplained. And exactly these are so-called 10 unanswered questions, avyakata, or in Sanskrit, avyakrta. They are, is the first set, the 4 of them, is the cosmos eternal or non-eternal, finite or infinite? The second set is, are the soul and the body, jiva and sarira, similar or different? And the third set is, after death, tathagata exists, does not exist, both exist and does not exist. Neither exists nor and does not exist. Tathagata is a term for an enlightened being. Of course, we are interested, because we are talking today about the psychophysical problem, we are interested in the second set. Are the soul and the body similar or different? Let's take a closer look at this problem. So, psychophysical problem in Buddhism, in early Buddhism, soul and body, jiva and sarira. These translations are, of course, very prefatory. So basically, it can be translated in many different ways. These are just convenient terms to translate these terms. So psychophysical problem or mind-body problem was one of the central problems in ancient India 2,500 years ago. It's widely discussed, and so it's in Jainism, in Buddhism, in many other traditions. But the Buddhist tradition fully acknowledged this challenge, how mental and physical are connected, and they gave a very distinct answer to this question, very intricate, and I think it deserves a careful study. So in order to look how early Buddhists approach psychophysical problem, I suggest that we look at the Jaliya Sutta, Dikha Nikaya number 7. This is the text from the Buddhist canon. So basically, it boils down to that the ascetics, wandering ascetics, shramanas, they come to the Buddha and ask him a question: if soul and body are the same or different. And surprisingly, the Buddha doesn't answer the question. He completely ignores it, and instead professes, teaches Buddhism, teaches how you practice Buddhism, how you practice meditation, how you acquaint yourself with the basic Buddhist terms, and how you get mastery in these items. After all, at the very end, so it's a long sutra, 20 pages or more, he says that the liberated person does not say that the soul and the body are the same or different. Yes, so this is paradoxical, as it often is in Buddhism, and probably the message is that when you get liberated, when you practice Buddhism, when you practice mindfulness to the extreme, you will understand this for yourself. And let's take a look at the further clarifications of this issue in Buddhist sources. First of all, let's take a look at dependent arising or dependent origination. You have all probably seen this picture once in your life. This is the famous Bhava Chakra, the wheel of existence, wheel of samsaric existence. Basically, it has 12 segments. Yes, I will explain in a bit. Basically, it represents the process of rebirth and coming into being in samsara. Yes, the process which does not involve, in Buddha's opinion, Buddha's idea, the process that doesn't involve a permanent subject. But we don't have to go into detail, but it's quite complicated. You can see that these first two segments, ignorance and sankhara activities, represent the past life. These 8 segments represent the present life, and this last one, jati and jara marana, represent the future life. So this is so-called 3-life interpretation of dependent origination. So basically, you can see that it starts with avidya, ignorance, follows with the sankhara, volitional activities, then consciousness, then name and form, psychophysical unity, and then 6 sense spheres, and so on, contact, and so. Basically, it's a picture. It gives a picture of development of a being that comes into this realm, that gets reborn. And I suggest that we look at a particular text which explains this dependent origination. It's Mahanidana Sutta, Dikha Nikaya 15. It starts with the last limb, with the last segment of dependent origination, Jara Maran, decay and death. And the Buddha asks in this text, what is the cause of decay and death? He says birth. What is the cause of birth? Existence, then clinging, then craving, then feeling, then contact, then name and form, and consciousness. And you can see that consciousness and name and form are mutually reciprocal. They are mutually interdependent. So basically they represent a nexus, basically some foundation of phenomenal experience. Yes, and the foundation of our existence in samsara. So this vijnana, in Sanskrit vijnana, namarupa, in Sanskrit namarupa, represent this nexus. Yes, namarupa is a very important term that is supposed to represent the principle of psychophysical individuation. Nama stands for mental, rupa stands for physical. They are thought to be mutually interdependent and interconnected. And so basically in vijnana or vijnana is a process of cognizing, so we can interpret that as when a subject becomes aware of reality, of himself, and so on. So, and let's take a look at further clarifications of vijnana and namarupa and their interdependence. It is said that nama and rupa arise together and perish together. It is exemplified by the yolk and white, which the hand cannot produce one separately from the other. The namarupa and vijnana said to be in the condition, in the relation which is called iddapachaya, the necessary condition. They presuppose each other. They cannot exist one without another. And another aspect of that is that vijnana and namarupa are likened to two cords of reed placed to support each other upright. So basically like this. And when one falls, the other falls as well. So you see that these are not, so to say, strictly philosophical, but more metaphorical clarifications of this issue, basically attempts at clarification of this issue. And basically we can take a look next at how Buddhists view the experience in general. So the Buddha in the Kachanagota Sutta says that the world inclines to two views of existence and non-existence of experience. Yes, but a liberated one, or one who sees the ultimate reality, who sees the worlds arising as it is, does not think of it in terms of existence, and one who sees its annihilation does not think of it in terms of non-existence. So supposedly that tells us that that exemplifies the Buddhist middle way, that neither fundamental, there is no fundamental substance in our experience, nor our experience is completely lacks any foundation. So, and next I suggest that we take a look at how early Buddhists view language. So, yes, I forgot to say. So, this approach, which is in this slide, exemplifies this dependent origination, this bhava chakra, the Buddhist conception of how samsara arises. And next, let's take a look at how the Buddha views language. In one of the sutta, he says that in different localities, people call the same thing a dish, a bowl, a vessel, a saucer, a pan, a pot, a mug, a basin, and so on. Whatever they call it in such and such locality, one speaks accordingly, firmly adhering to that expression and insisting only this is correct, anything else is wrong. and he basically concludes that this is how there comes to be insistence on local language and overriding normal usage. Basically, next Buddha says that a Buddhist practitioner does not do that. He doesn't insist on local language and doesn't override normal usage. And in one of the suttas, he says that a bhikkhu whose mind is liberated thus agrees with none, disputes with none, and he employs, though without misapprehending it, the speech currently used in the world. So we see, like with the question of existence, we see here that the Buddha relativizes and basically plays down the very significance of language and its ability to render the truth. So, summing up the Buddhist stance, psychophysical unity, as we have seen, is at the core of our experience. However, psychological and physical are not strictly ontologically opposed to each other. And neither psychological and physical nor other aspects of experience. The very language that is used to describe this feature is flawed. So, and I suggest that we can compare this to John Searle's view of psychophysical problem and language. Exactly in that, Searle says in his rediscovery of mind, consciousness is a mental and therefore physical property of the brain in the sense in which liquidity is a property of systems of molecules. And the fact that a feature is mental does not imply that it is not physical. The fact that a feature is physical does not imply that it is not mental. Moreover, Searle explains that our thinking and our words inherited from the tradition assume explicit oppositions, physical, mental, material, ideal, whatever, mind-body problem and so on. When we discuss the psychophysical problem, we are captives of a certain set of verbal categories. And he follows that with, we are prisoners of an outdated terminology. Yes. The Searle's view, like he insists, cannot be defined as monism, dualism, materialism, and any other received category. Therefore, I suggest that we can conclude that psychophysical problem was known to early Buddhists and psychophysical unity was important to them. However, they in the end deny the very opposition implied in it on the grounds of epistemological, metaphysical, and linguistic relativism, suspiciousness, general suspiciousness, skeptical approach. There is a significant parallelism between Searlean solutions to this problem and the early Buddhist thinking, also in their embracing paradox. And lastly, I believe that this is an important and intellectually fresh perspective that deserves to be brought into modern discourse on the nature of consciousness. Thank you.
Thank you, Gleb, for that presentation. So he actually finished 3 minutes ahead of time. So we have good time for questions from the audience. If not, let me ask a question, and in the meantime, I encourage audience to also think a bit. So I could relate to what you were saying towards the end from John Searle's take on consciousness. So are you saying that essentially in Buddhism also a similar approach to consciousness exists, like just like liquidity is just a property of some molecules coming together, similarly consciousness?
As far as I understand, Searle's view does not contradict anything within early Buddhism, so to say.
So your conclusion is that Searle's take is kind of a modern, something that is consistent with Buddhism.
Yes, I would. So basically, yes, of course, they come from different backgrounds. This is different traditions of thought and so on. But nevertheless, there is this unique, distinct view of relation of mental to physical, and there is parallelism between Searle's position and this so-called early Buddhist position.
Yes, so we have one question from the audience. Yes.
Maybe I have more comment, smaller questions, if I'm allowed to. So you have been investigate early Buddhism. Have you also investigated Abhidharma as well? I think.
I did.
Yeah. Okay. So I think actually to answer the questions of the chair, is there any theory to describe the relationship between mana and rupa, the mind and the body? Actually, I think the Abhidharma is a full, comprehensive, sophisticated tool, very precise until the molecule, the kalapa level to explain that. And I think it's, I don't know if you can comment on that, if you're familiar with the Abhidharma.
Yes. Yeah, with Abhidharma, there is the question of how we should understand it as a tool for meditation, as a metaphysical map, as a psychological aid for practice, and so on and so on. So that's a bit difficult. But what you mentioned, this kalapas and basically this minute analysis. So. The question about that is whether we reify this dharmas, whether we reify basically the elements in which the Buddhists divide the experience. Yes, this 83 dharmas and so on, 96 dharmas. Whether we reify them or not, whether we think that they are irreducible constituents of experience and ontologically true or not. So yeah.
Any other question? I have one more, if you don't mind.
Yes,
so what was so interesting to draw a correspondence to John Searle's philosophy, particularly? Why not any other philosopher?
Yes. So basically, because it really struck me that there is this parallelism. There's drastic, I don't know, not drastic, but very vivid, very clear parallelism between Searle's thought and what I understand of early Buddhist thought.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, I have one last comment, and you can tell me if you agree or disagree. So, since your title says resolving the mind-body problem, but what I find is actually in Buddhism and probably also in Searle's philosophy, the problem is actually not acknowledged. Do you agree with that?
Which problem?
The mind-body problem. So actually there's no resolution because you have not discussed the problem. Mm-hmm. But the problem is kind of not acknowledged. Mm-hmm. In that sense, it doesn't exist. So problem is resolved if you acknowledge its existence, but if you don't, then there is no problem. So do you agree with that?
Yeah, good question. I think, like I said in my presentation, that it's acknowledged. It was one of the crucial problems, actually, and the view is that we don't have an answer to the problem in the basically categories of our everyday language. Yes.
All right. Okay. With that, let's give a round of applause to Gleb. He's right on time. Thank you. So the next presenter is Alejandro Callara. Yes. Is your presentation here? Yeah. Yes. Please bring it up. In the meantime, I'll introduce you. So Alejandro is going to talk about central and peripheral neural correlates of analytical and concentrative meditation in Tibetan Buddhism. Alejandro.
Okay, thank you. So, well, they already presented the title, so I go up. Basically, this research is developed within the Tuscany health ecosystem. Objectives is to grow health and wellness technologies. Basically, this is part of the national recovery and resilience plans from the Italian government in response to COVID-19 pandemics. And this is the framework of the project. Actually, one of its aims is to advance technologies for health and well-being through a multidisciplinary approach. And this is where this work fits by studying correlates of consciousness and so on. Correlates of consciousness in meditation, sorry. Two key collaborations are necessary for this aim between the University of Pisa, and one collaboration is with the Istituto L'Amazon Kappa, which is a center for the study and the practice of Tibetan Buddhism not far away from Pisa. And the other collaboration is with the Searle Monastic University in the south of India. Okay, but let me do a step back just for 1 second. It all started during the pre-COVID era, in around 2018, when Professor Bruno Neri, who is also an author of this work, went to the monastery with an EEG device and recruited some volunteers that wanted to do acquisitions during their meditations. But the problem was that basically Bruno is an electronic engineer, so he had no idea to what to do with the data. Okay, so he called this person, which is Professor Nicola Vanello, who was, by that time, was my PhD supervisor. And since I was finishing my PhD during that time, as you may know, I had a lot of free time and nothing to do, basically. So I started collaborating within this project, okay? So this is the context. The objectives of this first research were many, ranging from hyperscanning studies to sleep brain studies, but probably one of the most important was to explore the effects of non-ordinary states of consciousness induced by meditation and brain activity. And all of these with the added value of having this collaboration with a millennia-old institution and expert meditators with homogeneous characteristics who have studied and practiced for decades within the same tradition, okay? The research was somehow naive in the sense that we collected data from every volunteer that wanted to participate, and this resulted in subjects with different levels of experience, okay? Furthermore, also the experimental protocol was kept as simple as possible in the sense that we asked basically to, to do their best meditation without any experimental constraint, okay? The only constraint was to do a 5 minutes eyes closed baseline for comparing issues. The meditation could be concentrative or analytical, which are the two main groups of types of meditation in Tibetan Buddhism. And the acquisition was ecological in the sense that it was typically done in monks' houses or common spaces, okay? And measurements were kept as simple as possible as well, in the sense that we had only this EEG device, low-density EEG device, and analysis. This part may be harder maybe for some of you, but it's just to say that these power spectral density features are simple measures that we can extract from the signals. Okay, so it was somehow naive. But in any case, we got some interesting results. I meant we published our work in an international journal, and we highlighted some interesting facts. First of all, during the meditation session, we observed that many of these features of these metrics of brain activity changed along the session with a statistical significance. And furthermore, we could observe that there were differences between the two types of meditation. According to the type of meditation, we had a different neural correlate, let's say. Differences were many. I mean, I won't describe any of these. But what I want you to know is that some of these differences could even be interpreted in terms of heightened active inhibitory attentional mechanism during the concentrative meditation compared to the analytical one. So we had both the correlate and a kind of nice interpretation of our results. Of course, this approach is related to the so-called neural correlates of consciousness. It's a theory-free approach in which we look for the minimal set of events that can jointly describe a state, okay? This is not the only approach. Of course, we have several theories of consciousness, as you may know, but the fact is that these theories are really a lot, okay? And some of these theories are reviewed in this work by Seth and Bain, which is an excellent review. And these global workspace theories, integration information theory, reentry theory, and predictive preprocessing, and higher order theories can be further explored through the use of the so-called contrast database. I don't know if anybody of you know this database, but it's a tool, it's a web page when you can analyze and compare empirical studies on consciousness theories. And what is really interesting is that somehow it has been observed in this work by Yaron and colleagues that depending on the theory you are using, somehow you are getting a specific result, okay? And even more interesting from my side is that if you merge up all these theories, you get this global brain activated, which is somehow a point of contact with our empirical approach that had nothing to do with these theories, which are basically really complicated to get into the analysis, right? So basically, driven by this convergence of the different theories and given the initial success of our empirical approach, our naive approach, we asked ourselves whether we can give a structure to our research in a more kind of psychological testing, right? The ones we use in Western science. And so we thought of measuring the meditators in a controlled environment by designing a standardized protocol for all subjects, maybe by expanding the physiological window with peripheral signals more than the EEG, which are correlates of autonomic nervous system activity, and maybe to extract more informative and multivariate features. And so we answered to each of these questions, first of all, with our collaborators. They have now this science center with lab facilities for acquiring physiological data, and they have this meditation room where the meditator can perform his meditation without any interference from outside, okay? Then, with the help of Geshes and monks from the Seraj University, we designed a standardized experimental protocol. And this was somehow difficult in the sense that, as you can see, apart from the eyes open and eyes closed at rest, which is for analysis purposes, there is this order of concentrative meditation, loving kindness, and emptiness, okay? The fact is that even we wanted as Westerns to randomize these conditions, they told us that the concentrative meditation was the basis for other kinds of meditations, so no randomization at all. We have to perform it first, okay? And then we have this natural path as suggested by the monks themselves, made of loving kindness and emptiness meditation, which are two common types of analytical meditation. Both of these ones are analytical, okay? So we have the standardized protocol, and we acquired non-invasive measures of a wide range of neurophysiological responses across 35 subjects, okay? Probably the most important is the electroencephalography, which provides a window into the dynamic function of the central nervous system with sufficient temporal resolution to follow brain-quakes dynamics. Without getting too much into detail, it's acquired by placing electrodes on the scalp, and the result is a set of spatial and temporal information from brain activity. Furthermore, we analyzed the heart rate variability, which is the variability in time between successive heartbeats, and this reflects basically the autonomic nervous system activity, both branches, the parasympathetic nervous system activity, which is the system that keeps you relaxed, and the sympathetic nervous system, which is the one which arises when you are answering to stimuli or treatments and so on. Furthermore, because of its implication in meditation, but also as a further index of autonomic nervous system activity, we recorded the respiration of the subject. And finally, with the use of a smartwatch from Empatica, we acquired the EDA signal, the electrodermal activity. I don't know if any of you know it, but it basically reflects the changes in the skin conductance and induced by sweat glands activity, which are under the only control of the sympathetic branch of the nervous system activity. So with this signal, you get basically the arousal state of the subject and maybe the answers to external stimuli. So we have a discrete set of signals. We extracted features as we usually do in biomedical engineering. By the way, I'm a biomedical engineering, and this is the reason of this kind of approach. We used several tools. I realized that EEG Lab doesn't have a logo, but I will ask why. And we got global measures from brain activity in terms of power spectral density, as in our naive approach, but also in terms of global coherence and global phase locking index, which are measures of brain connectivity. We also have features from the HRV, from the respiration, and from the EDA that reflects the autonomic nervous system activity, which is not under the control of the subject, of course. Okay. For each of these features, we use a linear mixed model, which is somehow an advanced option like the ANOVA, but a bit more sophisticated to describe differences between subjects. So we have this condition as a fixed factor and a random intercept for each subject. Then, since we are doing one model for each one of these features, we are correcting multiple hypothesis testing using the false discovery rate. This is basically to remove false positives, okay? And then we have this post-hoc comparison using contrast-based depth test on the fixed effects. So in order to understand whether each condition was different from another in terms of physiological variability. So what we observed many things. Some of them are interesting, some of them are less interesting. For example, the power spectral density changed in the theta, alpha, and gamma bands during the session. But as you can see in the theta and alpha bands, the only difference is between the eyes open and each of the eyes closed conditions, so possibly reflecting just an eye effect on the metrics. But for the power spectral density in the gamma band, we could observe also differences between the concentrative and the two types of analytical meditation, so possibly suggesting a phenomenon of interest. Okay. Global connectivity metrics reflected just the eyes closed and eyes open condition difference, so are not so interesting. But what is interesting for real is also the changes in the autonomic nervous system activity. From the heart rate variability, I have to tell you that these features, which are the average of the successive heartbeats and the standard deviation and a complex measure which is familiar with the standard deviation of successive heartbeats, are all measures of parasympathetic nervous system activity. And what we observed is that during the session, these measures increased, okay? So there was an effect. We will talk later of the interpretation. Interestingly, also the changes in the sympathetic nervous system activity increased, okay? Which is somehow, there is a synergistic effect of both the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. They're not additive. It doesn't mean that if there is one, the other cannot be there, okay? And finally, we got this nice U shape in the breathing rate, which allowed to distinguish between the resting conditions, both at the beginning and at the end, from the meditation conditions. So there was this kind of controlled breathing of the subject during the session. Let's do a summary of this in order to have a nice view of what we observed. From the EEG features, so the brain activity, we observed, apart from eyes closing and eyes open and eyes closing effects, we observed this power spectral density in the gamma band that was higher during the loving kindness and emptiness sessions compared to the concentrative session, possibly suggesting, we don't know, but possibly suggesting a high-level cognitive processing, which is also in line with the descriptions of each kind of practice, okay? Furthermore, from the HRV features and the EDA features, we observed both increased relaxation, possibly suggesting improved vagal tone and increased well-being during the session, as well as an increased arousal, which may suggest a status of relaxed vigilance. So the subject is relaxed, but is also attentive to internal and external triggers. Of course, because of the lack of randomization, we cannot fully exclude the time effect because this is a cover rate in the analysis. But it is also true that this is a practice that they usually do. I mean, they're not forced to stay in the lab and doing some kind of strange test, but it's a normal pathway that the meditators do during their practice. And finally, we have this breathing rate that is not specific for the type of meditation, but allows to distinguish between resting conditions and meditation sessions. So overall, we have this state of relaxed vigilance with a possibly high level of cognitive processing and with a controlled breathing that somehow matches the descriptions the Geshes gave us about each type of meditation. So I would like to leave you with a comparison between the pre-COVID approach we had and this one, which is, this is last year we went to India to get these 35 subjects, so this is newer. I would like to leave you with a comparison of these both approaches we use, the standardized and the do your best, in the sense that for the standardized protocol, the reduced temporal variability allows to have a within subject design generally leading to a higher statistical power. On the other side, the do your best protocol potentially maximizes the effect sizes because the subject meditates according to his own rhythm, mimicking real life conditions, so possibly maximizing the effect of the meditation. And this also applies and may reveal spontaneous subject-specific changes that the standardized protocols do not allow to see. Of course, this do your best design has the drawback of the group analysis in the sense that we cannot, it's not easily to merge the statistic for the group of statistics, different subjects with different length of acquisitions and so on. So what we got after these two studies is possibly a kind of win-win solution in which probably the best approach is to repeat the do your best using a single session for each acquisition. So one subject performs only concentrative, then the same subject in another session performs the analytical, then the same subject performs something else, which requires, of course, a lot of efforts, but possibly can be a win-win solution to this kind of issues. Of course, I would like to acknowledge that we are not alone. There are some collaborations around Europe with monastic institutions, but that's all. I want to thank the group in Pisa, the group in India, and of course you for the attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Alejandro. We have time for a few questions. Anybody would like to ask a question? Yep.
Two, actually. The first one, you did your PhD in which area?
I did a PhD in biomedical signal processing and analysis. So I worked on brain connectivity and methods for inferring brain connectivity, but I'm new to this topic.
Yeah. And I kind of comment regarding do your best meditation. Was it considered that there is not a best meditation, the best meditation?
Yeah. Maybe it's also a kind of issue in communicating by me. And do your best, it's the way we call it, but inside the group, it was something like do the meditation as you want, feel comfortable and not.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah.
Which works best for you? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for the presentation. There is a literature that reports a gamma wave and hyper gamma wave in a very, very high proficient meditators. I don't know if you find something about the relationship between gamma or hyper gamma.
Actually, I didn't. I have to admit that I'm not a super expert of this kind of literature. I'm getting into in this period. But no, I didn't analyze also because we stop at 45 hertz, so we are not looking after that for the moment. But
thank you.
Good advice. Thank you.
Thank you.
One last. I would like to see the picture of the description of the meditation practices.
Yeah. If you prefer, I can send it to you because I had to cut what the monks sent me because they were too long, so they're cut inside. But okay. You can also write to the email. Okay.
Anything else? One last. Yes.
So you have a beautiful analysis on the physiological data, and then you talk about parasympathetic and parasympathetic.
Yeah.
Do you find any clue of which meditation type is related to either parasympathetic or sympathetic response from the body?
Yeah. Actually, we found this trend in which both indexes increase during the session. As I told before, they cannot be fully disentangled from the time effect because of the non-randomized design, and this is a big limitation that it's difficult to deal with because the meditation has to be performed in that order. But they suggest this increase in both sympathetic tone and parasympathetic activity may suggest this kind of relaxed vigilance or increased well-being, but also attention to the world and so on.
Okay, thank you. Let's give another round. So next is going to be me. So I'm trying to go and time myself here. So if I'm running over, please do let me know. I have 20 minutes just like everyone else. So, all right. So I'd like to start with a small prayer before I go on my presentations. This is just expressing gratitude to my teachers. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuraunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So again, I'm Venkatesh Chembrolu. I'm coming from IIT Mandi. It's one of the premier institutes in the northern part of the country in India. And we are part of this center called the Indian Knowledge System and Mental Health Applications. In short, it's also known as ICSMA. We're very grateful for the opportunity that the organizers have given us to be here and present our work. One of the organizers is Haire, so I'd like to thank you. I also like to thank my co-authors or collaborators on this work. Dr. Jyotiranjan, he's part of the audience here, and Anshul is one of our PhD students at the center. So before I go on my talk, actually I'd like to give a 30-second pitch for one of the conferences that we have been doing in India, and this is called the Mind, Brain and Consciousness Conference. Is exactly 1 month ago. As you can see, it concluded on 7th June, so exactly 1 month ago. And we had the second edition of the conference this year. It's gaining momentum. We are still new in the field. It's not as big as this one, but I could say that it's maybe half as big already, because we had over 350 participants and a good selection of like plenary talks, over 110 papers presented, and over 60 posters presented over a period of 4 days. So I'd like to take this opportunity to invite all of you for the next edition of the conference, which will be next year in India. All right. So the details will, of course, still have to be figured out. So there are a few keywords that I'd like all of you to take home today from this presentation. If the whole presentation is too much to remember or to take home, and these three keywords are hierarchical ontology, semantic information, and the screen of perceived reality. And of course, I'll be touching upon all these in the course of my presentation. So before we go to the actual work and the ideas that we want to present, there's some motivation behind it, and I think the motivation is shared here in this forum. That's what we are here primarily for discussing consciousness, and not only consciousness, but what we don't understand about consciousness. Right? So for a long time in history, for centuries together, we have been trying to understand consciousness and try to boot it up from, okay, I get confused between these buttons. How physical processes could give rise to subjective experience, and that's an open problem. That's been an open problem, and that's the famous hard problem of consciousness. There's an explanatory gap over here, and the physicalist paradigms, they fail to explain the nature of qualia, free will, and intentionality. Right? So our approach, what we are trying to do here, is that we propose and start from the idea that consciousness is the fundamental ontological ground. So we start with consciousness as fundamental, and then our aim is to reimagine matter and perception through the consciousness first lens. Therefore, the title of the talk was Perception and Reality in Consciousness First Approach. Physicalism is a simple idea. I mean, not so simple idea, but simply put, it can be stated as it's an idea where all observable phenomena can be reduced to physical processes or properties, right? And science so far has done a great job by utilizing principles from physicalism to make tremendous progress. AI and neuroscience these days are doing a great job in exploring a large variety of phenomena, especially in understanding the brain and so on. However, they are still not touching upon the essential problems of consciousness. And this is probably rooted in the ideas of logical positivism and reductionism, which is logical positivism says that all asserted truths can be empirically verified or they can be analytically proved. And we have enough information, enough knowledge today to say that both of these, they don't hold true in the realm of consciousness, in trying to study consciousness. So definitely consciousness, to study consciousness, we need new approaches, we need new thought processes, probably to also re-evaluate the way we do science. Right, so those are the unresolved issues, and we also know about the observer effects in quantum physics, and there's a reason why there's so much correlation or correspondence that people draw upon between consciousness and quantum physics, because they too both share the same enigmatic issues that the conventional science is not able to address. So from philosophy point of view, there are alternatives to physicalism which have been explored, continuing to be explored. One of them is panpsychism, which is the idea that consciousness is intrinsic to all matter, right? But here there's a big challenge which is known as the combination problem, as to how small units of consciousness in small elements of matter combine together to form something bigger consciousness, like we as an entity, biological system are conscious. How does that combination take place? That's a difficult problem. There's also analytical idealism, where again consciousness is taken as the ontological ground, but then it doesn't go far enough to understand or reframe the understanding of matter. So there's a missing hierarchy between mind and matter, which is not explored completely in analytical idealism. These are just a couple that I mentioned. Of course, there are other approaches, other alternatives to physicalism. But in short, I just want to get to what we have to present here, which is that our model, we are trying to present something which is hierarchical. It has the flavor of semantic information, and it is an interaction-based ontology. So what are we talking about over here? So what we hypothesize, or we start with, is that there is this hierarchy of ontologies, and they are structured in a layered manner, and they are dependent on each other, then they are interacting with each other, and during the course of the interaction, they give rise to the perceived reality, and the interaction is also something special. So there is this notion of the conscious whole, and there are individual conscious units which are part of the conscious whole. The conscious whole cannot be reduced to some of all the conscious units, but it is a superset of all the conscious units and something more. And each conscious unit again has within it a hierarchy of what we call as the integrator and then the channels. And these channels are basically channels of information, outgoing and incoming information. And the integrator is what integrates the information and makes sense of it and gives rise to structured experiences. So the key feature is that these are non-reducible layers that transform meaning through interaction. And the 4 items that are listed over here in this hierarchy are also mentioned over here: the conscious whole, the unit, the integrator, and the channels. The ontological structure of reality, now the 2 key things over here are the conscious whole and the conscious units. And the key is that the interaction between them, the reality emerges as a result of the interaction that's going on between these two. Okay. So what is the nature of this interaction? So what we are thinking of this is that information now is no longer abstract bits with ones and zeros, but it is fundamentally meaningful and it is connected to consciousness. So the interaction is also taking place in terms of information exchange, but the information is not Shannon-like information, but it is semantic information it has meaning embedded in it, right? The information has embedded meaning in it. At a surface level or superficial level, it could be reduced to bits, abstract bits, meaningless bits, but actually there is meaning embedded in all interaction that takes place. And experience arises from meaning and not just from raw data. So these channels, they carry the perceptual and action information back and forth from a conscious unit, and the integrator is what puts it all together and transforms it into a coherent experience, right? So this is how interaction we think or we are putting forward that is taking place. And what this does is it shifts our understanding of perception from signal processing to meaning construction, right? So this is a fundamental shift in the way we think about information and about how units, conscious units, interact with their environment. And now what this does is that this formalism, what it does is that the previous image that we had with the conscious whole and the conscious units is just reframed into a slightly different looking model over here. Why? Because the smaller circle representing a conscious unit is just drawn a little bit outside, not completely outside the conscious whole. And this is done to illustrate this idea that the interaction between the conscious unit and the conscious whole through these perception and action channels, what that does is that it generates this screen of perceived reality. So, what we are saying is that, suggesting is that perceived reality is actually an organized internal image of reality. It's not the reality itself. The reality fundamentally is something different, which is based in consciousness, but a screen of perceived reality appears as a result of the interaction between the units and the conscious whole. And the nature of the screen of perceived reality depends upon the perceptual mechanism, which is defined by which is defined by perception and the action channels. Okay, so here the physical world, as we see it, as we experience it, the physical world is nothing but a consistent projection of reality. So the projection of the actual reality onto the screen is consistent and steady with time, and because our shared perceptual mechanisms enable it to also have it consistent among individuals. Therefore, we all can agree upon a shared physical world, so to speak. The integrator here plays a very important role. It actually it not only integrates all the information and constructs coherent experiences, but it also generates abstract interpretations and experiential material through recursive layers of reflection, which are shown by these dotted curve here over here, and it's labeled as R1, R2, and so on. So this shared screen of reality, by recasting the way how we are perceiving the world, how we are interacting with the world, this needs to be explored. So right now it's at a conceptual stage and a little bit of philosophical stage, but we aim to bring it further down into the domain of actual science, where we could also do some experiments and validate some of the predictions. But in the meanwhile, while we try to get to there, it's important to discuss why this reframing of the whole scenario of how we are perceiving the reality is important. Is because once we do this, there are many important implications that come along. One is that the nature of the reality is inherently subjective. It is not objective. Objective is just a convenient way to put it in terms of shared perceptual mechanisms, but the reality is subjective in nature. So by that, we don't need to give up our subjective nature of experience rooted in consciousness, but that actually becomes foundational, and everything else becomes a derivative. The objectivity is a consensus created by the shared perceptual mechanisms, as I mentioned. And going back to the previous point, the subjectivity in nature is of two types. One is existential and perceptual in nature. If this time during Q&A I can get to that a little bit more. And in terms of science, the implications for science, what this approach implies is that the space, time, and matter, the physical realm, the physical realm that we inhabit and we experience, is a manifestation on the screen of perception, right? On the screen of perceived reality, it's a manifestation on that. So it's like an event that is taking place. The whole of perception and understanding of reality is an event taking place on the screen. It's actually not the actual ontological fundamental reality. So that reframes how we look at the world. The important point here is that mind-body problem has been a philosophical issue for a very long time. However, here in our approach, the mind and body, they are both layered within consciousness. So the mind-body problem is a problem when you think of mind and body as two different entities, and then how they causally interact is an issue. However, if these are within the hierarchical ontology, which is rooted in consciousness, then there is no contradiction or there is no paradox. They both can be synthesized together, and in fact they both serve a certain purpose of generating meaning through these different layers of interaction. And another philosophical issue, which is that free will, in the physicalist paradigm, ultimately free will becomes an illusion. There's no real way to explain free will. But here now, because of the consciousness first approach, free will becomes an inherent property of the conscious agency, right? It's no longer no longer an illusion. The broader implications, and this is something that is of very much of interest to us at the center, is that we want to also develop protocols and methodologies to transform education into a more holistic approach, right? Instead of just focusing on academic achievements, the whole education is meant to be more holistic and supposed to give a more boost personal growth. Similarly, approach to mental health can be more holistic, and it can promote the enrichment of conscious experience, right? If consciousness is fundamental, then consciousness should be the main focus of all our attempts in life. And that has a big role to play in mental health, and therefore, techniques such as self-awareness, mindfulness, and so on, they can be of great value to everyone in daily life. For technological initiatives like AI, AI is a big buzz these days. And people are claiming whether AI can be conscious. In fact, there's a parallel session going on this theme, whether AI can be conscious. I'm not going to answer that question right now, but here at least what we can say is that we can realign the goal of AI and technological advancement. Instead of trying to replicate consciousness, we could use it to enrich the human conscious experience. And it also has pretty substantial implications on ethics. For instance, there is a scientific way by which we can promote the importance of empathy, sustainability, and holistic living. So although it's conceptual, and I'm just about to finish, although the approach and the methodology I've explained is mostly conceptual, a little bit philosophical at this stage, we are looking at developing different mathematical approaches to take this forward, so that the idea is not to reduce these ideas to mathematics, but to use mathematics as a tool to predict some behaviors of, let's say, conscious experience evolution over time, or meaning construction over time through these different interaction between different layers and so on. So there's a lot of interesting study we can do by using mathematical models, and that will be the next stage of this work. So in conclusion, again, few key things that I'd like to summarize is that we're saying there is a whole new approach that we can take, and I'm not suggesting we are the only ones doing it, or we're the first ones doing it. There have been many, but we are adding some new flavor and new contribution here. Is that consciousness is fundamental. There's a lot to explore, and probably many new discoveries to be made with this approach. And this is important, because if that is true, then consciousness constructs reality, not the other way around. So consciousness is fundamental, so it constructs all of our reality, lived reality. Objectivity is an appearance on the screen of on the screen of perceived reality, and that has big implications for science, especially for quantum physics. We won't go into that right now, but there is a lot of openings that we can explore, and ultimately, as scientists, we want to understand matter, because that is where our common ground is, right? You cannot live my subjective experience, I cannot yours, but we all can talk about the tables and chairs in this room. So matter, of course, the battle has to be fought on the ground of matter, and if this approach is, it has value, then it has to be explored, and we have to show something that the conventional scientific theories are not able to do. So in this approach, matter being emergent and not being foundational, this is an idea that needs to be explored further, and that is where some of the mathematics might also be useful. So thank you for your attention. Yeah, we can have few questions and answers. Yes. We have 4 minutes. Yes.
Sure. All right. Yeah, thank you for that talk. And I have a very similar presentation coming up on Wednesday as a poster, where I also talk about the interaction between fundamental awareness and matter. But why should we deny matter? The chair exists.
Yeah, actually, nowhere in my presentation I said we deny matter. Actually, that's...
No, if you said matter is an emergent of consciousness.
Yeah, so that doesn't mean I'm denying matter, right? Matter is emergent, means I'm acknowledging matter, but it's just that we're trying to turn the tables around and saying that instead of taking matter as foundational or fundamental, because it has a lot of philosophical issues, especially related to consciousness, so let's try the other approach. Let's take consciousness as fundamental and explore the idea that matter emerges as a result of interactions within the realm of consciousness.
Got it.
So matter is real, but it becomes emergent, not foundational. Yeah.
So the way I look at it is, we have two languages of nature. One is awareness, which is a subjective thing, and other is the matter. We cannot go from one to another. What we study is the interaction. The result of the interaction is what we end up studying. So the matter appears in consciousness, and we study matter within consciousness. We cannot study matter outside of consciousness. So, and in that, we are not going to deny matter. So we can kind of go midway. We're saying that awareness also exists, matter also exists, but what we end up studying is just the interaction. And if we do that, I have a kind of quantum interpretation also of it. So the wave particle duality that exists is not a property of matter alone. It's a property of matter within consciousness. And if we do that, then the duality is not happening, is not the matter problem. It's the consciousness problem. It's the wave of possible potential collapsing into one particular experience.
Sure. So let's not go into quantum physics and collapse and so on, but I'll just comment a little bit on what you said in the beginning. You said that there is, well, let's take the middle approach. There is matter, there is consciousness, and we're studying interaction.
Yes.
So that's the whole problem, right? Like once you say there is matter, there is consciousness, and they are of two different types, then how do they even interact? Right? That's the classical mind-body problem, just re-put in a different way. So therefore, actually, this dualism has been an issue in science, both and in philosophy. Therefore, groups of scientists and philosophers have always been trying to drift towards monism.
Sure.
Right.
I'm not a dualist.
Either it is that's what it seemed to suggest.
No.
Okay.
So it's not that this consciousness has its own agency. I'm not saying this consciousness alone is intelligent, or I'm not talking about it as a soul or anything. It is just a field of awareness. It just gives you an potential to feel yourself. So once a field of awareness interacts with matter, and you're right, we don't know how it interacts, and that's what we're trying to study, probably as part of objective OR, reduction, etc. But there is interaction happening, and so way I look at matter is a filter. It just filters this field of awareness, and whatever remains is our subjective experience.
All right. So maybe it's a long, detailed discussion, so we should take it offline. Any other questions or comments on the presentation? Yes. Jyotiranjan, yes.
I mean, on his comments. So all of us are sitting here, we understand English, that's why communicating. So it's a common thing that you carry, I carry. So that's why there is a communication. So unless matter and awareness, as he's mentioning, unless there is something common between them, there won't be any interaction. I mean, that's the foundation for any interaction in physics also. So, yeah.
Right. So it's a deeper thing that you're asking, so we can follow it up. Anything? One last? Okay, last.
Yeah, you didn't. I don't think you said much about what work or traditions your work is grounded in. I'm just curious what you're building on.
What we're building on?
Yeah,
I didn't get the question.
I'm just wondering about your references. Like what work do you build?
Oh, so I gave several references on my slides.
Can you just speak to some of that, or like? I can go look it up, but I'm just
right.
curious.
So I mean, we start with, for instance, this is actually submitted to peer review recently. So hopefully it will go through and it will come out. We can share that or the manuscript if you like. You can take a look. But the references, some of the references are the classic references like David Chalmers' hard problem of consciousness. Like we start from there, then we go into a little bit about logical positivism and limits of physicalism. And then there's one important reference that we draw upon is Donald Hoffman. I gave his references on his interface theory of perception. So there are some similarities with Don's approach, especially trying to treat consciousness fundamental and building grounds up by considering consciousness fundamental. But there's also some differences from his approach. So those roughly are, the references and some ideas that we're trying to build upon.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Okay. Be quick.
So when we say the screen of reality.
Yeah.
Okay. So that means the reality is different than what is being presented on the screen. So
right.
What is the real reality?
Yeah, correct. And that's how we differentiate between perceived reality and ontological reality.
Yeah.
So screen is for the perception, but perception is a manifestation of the process, and the ontological reality is actually what is underlying, which is giving rise to the screen. So there is
what
these
is
two
underlying
things.
is consciousness.
Correct. Yeah. So that's what we are trying to reframe. That consciousness is underlying fundamental, and the observed reality is something that's projected on the screen.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go to the next one. So next we have Rakenduvadhana. She's going to present on scientific inquiry, the substrate of experientiality and subjectivity, a precarious triumvirate, right? So let's give it to her.
Okay, good evening to everyone here. I'm Rakenduvadhana Srinivasan, a neuroscientist and writer from Helsinki, Finland, and today I'm here to instigate an inquiry on worldviews and reference points of investigators of reality as philosophers, scientists, and thinkers. And in a world that is increasingly moving towards virtuality, and in a world where we do not deal with physical entities as much as we do with experiential entities, as scientists, philosophers, and experiencers ourselves, perhaps we are arriving at a mutual desideratum for a shift in the reference point. And what I wish to explore today is that science must begin to work through a framework of logic that is valid no matter what is the ultimate nature of reality. So let's explore further. So now in my quotidian life, I mostly operate in the neuroscience, traditional neuroscience field, and in that sense, this whole talk comes from a fully internal perspective of the inherent dogmas in science, and this is why I see the exigence for a shift in our central reference points of scientific inquiry. And the preponderant tendency is to ascribe primacy to the world and to posit our experience as secondary. And in the perspective of majority of worldviews, a shared phenomenal world is a fact that overrides subjectivity. Now, not only is there a certainty of a shared phenomenal world, but science often pedestals an objective and non-subjective reality. And there's a stance that all the investigations indeed probe the non-subjective. And the primacy that is ascribed to the non-subjective world comes from the idea that it is non-private, that it is shared. And another attribute that grants hierarchical priority to this shared non-subjective reality is that it is independent of the experiencer. Now, a close and honest examination reveals that each of these ideas exist in a quicksand of belief. And in the depths of empirical inquiry and logic, a shared phenomenal world is not a given, and perhaps a utopia even. And we'll get to that, why that is the case. And furthermore, knowledge of a non-subjective phenomenal world that is independent of the experiencer is in fact a logical fallacy. So what is it that we can state with certitude, and what is the line of logic and inquiry that holds validity no matter what is the terrain of reality? So upon closer scrutiny, it becomes obvious that the singular thing that can be stated with certainty and with certitude is that there is experience. Experience is the only certain substrate. And from the Nagelian perspective, I do not know what it's like to be a bat. And there's a fundamental impenetrability to the subjective experience of a bat. And what is indubitable, however, is that both the bat and I have a subjective experience. Though there are dissimilitudes to the contents of the subjective experiences themselves, to experience is one and the same, irrespective of the contexts and contents. Now, everything about the phenomenal world is accessible to me only through experience, and experience alone. And of course, in this framework, experience is a term that's used in the broadest sense. Everything or anything that is presented to awareness or is faced by awareness is experience. So here, the definition of experience encompasses physicality, all forms of memory, cognition, mental phenomena, emotionality, ideas, conceptual contrivances, abstractions, wakefulness, deep sleep, everything. And reverberating with the Eastern philosophical perspectives, the mind in itself is an experience. The ambits and the ideas of the known and unknown are also experiences. So if it were taken to the broader anthropomorphic scale, all of human phenomenal world is known to us through experience. Any and all contrivances of investigations that we use, tools and technologies, mathematical equations and theories, are all, in fact, contrivances of experience. And this is something that the majority of science blatantly refuses to acknowledge. There's a spurious belief that the moment information arrives through instruments and devices, it somehow surpasses experience and subjectivity, when in reality, all these contrivances are merely extensions of our experiential appetite, and everything is always within the domain of subjective experience. And there is nothing that I can know about the world or reality or phenomena that surpasses experience or is outside the ambit of experience. So therefore, the more you delve into this, it becomes apparent that we are investigating experiences, while investigation in itself is a meta-level experience. And then we can ask, are we in reality investigating objects? If there are no objects that can exist without a subject, that is, an experiencer, what does it mean? Further down this line of inquiry, we arrive at a radical outcome, one that is also proposed by older and contemporary schools of thought. And if there are no objects that exist independent of a subject, then perhaps I do not encounter or investigate objects at all. What I encounter and investigate are the subject itself. So analytical idealism proposed by Kastrup argues that what we call objective reality is actually a representation within the experiencer, and thus science cannot escape subjectivity because both the act of inquiry and the results of inquiry are experiences. And similarly, in Advaita Vedanta, in Advaita logic, it holds that the ultimate reality is pure consciousness or awareness. And the supposed separation between the observer and the observed is, in this view, an illusion. So in essence, both these frameworks show that scientific inquiry cannot truly extricate itself from subjectivity, since all knowledge and observation are experiences. And they also point to the direction that the essence of objects is questionable. What appears as objects is ultimately the subject itself. Now, going further with the line of insurmountable subjectivity of experience, I want to explore with you what I term ontological soliloquy. So to each of us, the impenetrability of the subjective experience of a bat is very clear. However, in the anthropomorphic context, we seem to believe that our subjective realities are to a large degree analogous or bear similitude. And what I wish to draw attention to is that the impenetrability of subjectivity is very much at play also in the interhuman context. So each of us operate from an utterly unique internal language of reality, which is impossible to duplicate in one another. So this internal language of reality is, of course, an edifice of qualia. Now, it's a complex and dynamic construct of a myriad of discrete units of qualia, and the problem of impenetrability exponentiates with the complexity of this language and the numerosity of the individual units of qualia that are in the picture. So if a single unit of qualia, if one may call it that, is impenetrable and ineffable, then one can imagine what it is in the context of an amalgamation of numerous such entities of qualia that are also constantly dynamic. And this is the internal language of reality, or lingua interna of an individual, as I term it. So where do we stand with such complex and utterly unique internal languages and the impenetrability that we face? And I propose that to a large extent, we are in a state of ontological soliloquy. Communication is largely an illusion. So is an intersubjective reality or an agreement about the phenomenal world. Whatever we know about the world and whatever we continue to learn about it is always in terms of our own lingua interna. Whatever we may conceive of the inner terrain of another will always be in terms of our own. And metaphorically speaking, we are akin to spiders roving and simultaneously creating the ambits of our webs of comprehension. And the spider silk that comes from this internal reality sets the limit for everything that we know, everything that we theorize, speculate, and contemplate on. So what we term communication is essentially an interaction which enables changes in the inner terrain or conceptions without an actual exchange of ideas. There's nothing exchanged. And this, whatever happens, is in terms of one's own lingua interna. Thus, there is nothing transferred in the reaction, and there's never a confirmation that the two individuals interacting access the same aspect of experience. So in a poetic sense, the whole of life is a soliloquy, a conversation we have with ourselves and ourselves alone. And this seems to be a fundamental facet of experience. Now, whatever of others and otherness I know is perpetually through my experience. There's simply no way that I can receive a confirmation of the existence and the experiences of others that surpass my subjective experience. Thus, what can be said of the phenomenal world, or the presence of others, or the experiences of others, beyond my subjective experience? However radical this is an irrefutable facet of experience. And it is really so that experience presents itself in a solipsistic nature. So I don't bring the line of argument that others do not exist, but to regard the fact that the fundamental nature of experience presents reality in this manner. And in concursion with ontological soliloquy, we are unable to truly access or confirm parallel experiencers and experiences. So furthermore, one could argue that in line with the numerosity of experiences and the distinct internal languages, the lingua interna, there are many worlds. Qualia and lingua interna allow for a novel interpretation of the many worlds theory. So if this is really how reality presents itself, then there's certainly an exigence for recalibrating the philosophy of science. Science must regard the arbitrarity of our definitions and the illusory nature of our collective agreements. And the dubiousness of a shared phenomenal world does not end inquiry. Clearly, the world still goes on. And even though our experiences are solipsistically sealed, even though many worlds pullulate from the uniqueness of unique internal languages, the world still goes on. And thus, by confronting the nature of reality and experience, there's an avenue for the renaissance of science to operate beyond its current dogmas. Now, there is a plurality of experience and complexities and unique lingua interna, but awareness, the awareness that faces experience, is one and the same. Both the bat and I experience. To experience is to experience. It is fundamental and one in that sense, and regardless of the complexities, intricacies, contents, and contexts of experiences. So in line with Eastern philosophical perspectives such as Advaita Vedanta, in this framework, the mind in itself is an experience. Physicality, mental cognition, analysis, emotionality, perception, all these are experiences. And if these are all experiences, then it can be taken that to experience is something far more fundamental. If these are all experiences, then they are not requisites to experience or integral to the awareness that watches it all, the awareness to which experiences are presented. So the awareness is not a physical, emotional, cognitive, mnestic, or mental phenomenon, and therefore it does not necessitate complexity. Experience and awareness tolerate complexity, they accommodate complexity, but they don't require it. The only requisite of experience and awareness is existence. Therefore, an atom experiences atomhood. The experience of atomhood requires only an atom. And this, however, doesn't entail self-awareness. It is simply the experience of existing, which is far more fundamental, uncomplicated, non-self-reflective, and non-autobiographical awareness. Therefore, experience is possibly truly fundamental and profoundly universal from the quantum to the macrocosmic levels. And in Advaitic logic, existence is equated to consciousness or awareness, the Sat-Chit. And even in the recent advance in science, we're beginning to uncover that consciousness and awareness are fundamental to all levels of existence. Similarly, cosmopsychist, idealist, and panpsychist philosophical perspectives have been long proponents for such a view. So we are truly at a precipice of time where we begin to appreciate experientiality as a universal substrate, and hence it's crucial to reorient the starting point of scientific inquiry. And holism is an apposite stance to begin to tackle this. So just briefly to grace on experience beyond, existence beyond experience, this is an apothegm that bears two meanings, and I'll briefly explore both. It could denote non-subjective existence or objective reality, and that is something, like many others, I maintain it to be sempiternally impenetrable and unknown. And existence beyond experience could also denote the question of what is existence without experience. And it denotes non-experiential existence in the context of each entity. Non-experience or non-experiential existence is pure awareness. So here in non-experiential existence, I postulate that in line with Advaita Vedanta perspectives, that there is no uniqueness, but only oneness. And therefore, experiential existence is impenetrable, it's afflicted with uniqueness, and it is afflicted with non-superimposable qualia, but non-experiential existence is simply unambiguous oneness. So given that subjectivity is inextricable and it's an impenetrable aspect of reality, the world or reality independent of the observer is subject to question. And here we encounter the ethicality that is at stake. And it becomes clear that the philosophy of science must be founded on a worldview where consciousness is central and not auxiliary, or worse still, illusory. And we are otherwise taking an antithetical approach to reality itself and building crystal paradigms ridden with deeply problematic dogmas. So it becomes clear that our comprehension, theories, analyses can never exist in a vacuum separated from the rest of the aspects of our experience in our life. And really, it draws attention to a holistic approach which has been long proposed by Eastern philosophical schools of thought, even such as thinkers such as Jiddu Krishnamurti have proposed this. So this illusion of compartmentalization, even though it's sort of ubiquitous right now in all spheres of inquiry, is certainly something that has to be addressed. And every scientist and inquirer must be armed with the philosophical depth and also tremendous self-awareness and psychological hygiene. So in line with that, I think subjectivity and experience cannot be scientifically penetrated unless we are open to and adopt methods of inward empirical investigation. So why is it that as scientists and inquirers, we're more comfortable with placing the reference point at that which is seemingly external, dynamic, relative, and often uncertain, than to the one thing which can be the certain thing that we are really certain about? Why are we not interested in our own internal terrain, and why do we seldom regard ourselves as subjects of inquiry and experimentation? So this is yet another aspect from Eastern schools of thought that would be tremendously beneficial to scientific inquiry. So turning inward is a crucial step to comprehending the intricacies of subjectivity. Lastly, I would also say that interdisciplinarity is such a tremendous necessity for the inquiry of consciousness, and here we are in TSC, which is one of the most perfect examples of interdisciplinary inquiry. It's wonderful to be here. So just to conclude, gnosis is gnosis. Science cannot be dissected from philosophy. And to reiterate the words of many, the West must meet the East, and the novel must embrace the ancient. So that's my contact if you have any questions, and I will just leave two Upanishads that contain certain Advaitic essences that pertain to this talk. So thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Rakenduvadhana. Okay, few questions.
Okay, thanks for the talk. And you mentioned that all that consciousness faces the subjective experience, right? And an example is qualia. Am I correct? Yes. Right. So now qualia is subjective experience and just purely like a subject, right? Right. But when I keep looking at when I keep feeling that qualia, that's and then I have to find or notice that another subject looking at the qualia, right? And then qualia became like objective, right? Object, and then suppose that subject and like I looking at the qualia become like subject, and then I'm got confused. I cannot determine which is which. Like a feeling like showing a Necker cube, Necker cube, going like that way. So why this is happening, and how do you interpret or explain, that kind of, situation?
I think that one main problem is that with most of the semantic choices and like the Western worldviews, we don't have a separation of subjects and objects very clearly, as much as we do perhaps from Eastern perspectives. Sort of mental phenomena themselves are considered a subject rather than an object, which is not really the case in Eastern philosophy. The mind itself becomes an object, clearly. So I think that more than the problem of being confused, I think that it's about what we are educated about, what is the subject and what is the object, and what we are learning in the world about it. And then when you're able to delve into other perspectives that go further into a very radical approach, and perhaps you're able to see the distinction between what is pure awareness and what is it that is being presented to it, including the mind itself.
Can you elaborate once again on the difference between consciousness and awareness? Because, to add to it, that what I believe defines the human brain as self-awareness, which is, I think, the unique feature of the human brain. So, can you elaborate on the difference between that?
So, yeah, I don't distinguish between consciousness and awareness. I didn't make a distinguishment between the two, and I think many don't. And then about the human brain and self-awareness, I think that, yes, self-awareness is a very unique and truly fundamentally human aspect of experience, but we really have to go further with science, beyond the limitations that we have been ridden with all these years, and we're surpassing it, to be able to question whether it's only humans who have that self-awareness. So yeah, I don't think that I have the answer to your question yet, but I do have a hope that we will be answering these questions soon.
You were mentioning about non-experiential awareness and something. We have to keep it to one question.
Hi, I just want to ask you a question regarding your speech. And the question is, like, if you want to create a science to study subjective experience, do you think there is a limit in the it's a semantic problem more than a cultural one? Like, if you want to create a science that tries to objectively study subjectiveness, do we need to reconsider language?
Yeah, I think that language, of course, language and semantic definitions play a large role in inquiry, more than traditional neuroscientists would appreciate it. That's one point, surely. About whether subjective experience can be explored and how far we can go with that in science, it's not a question that I can answer. I am optimistic that we could go further than we are right now, and that really requires radicality in our approach, getting rid of dogmas, and that's what I am talking about here. So I think that, yeah, I don't want to be pessimistic to say that we will never discover anything about subjective experience, I would say that it is quite highly optimistic to say that you will unveil everything about it. But I think we will certainly go much further than we are right now, especially if we modify our line of inquiry.
I would like to elaborate on his question further, that between self-awareness and consciousness, self-awareness being awareness of me, of this individual body, of my person, of my thoughts, of my emotions, and awareness being a separate entity, not symmetrical to self-awareness. Do you see that also? That this is not as symmetrical between self-awareness and awareness. That is two different
Okay, I think I may be getting where you're at, that there's, even though we proceed into awareness, we go further and further with it, but there's still this sort of line that connects us to our individual identity or persona. Perhaps that's what you're referring to, and it's sort of inextricable from awareness unless you go even further. And then the question is, does awareness have to be linked to an identity?
All right, yeah, we'll have to close it there. Sorry, we are running few minutes late now. So let's thank the speaker again, Rakenduvadhana. Thank you. Okay, next we have Hide Segusa. He's going to do consciousness metaphor awakening non-locality of consciousness. All right, that sounds interesting. Is it going to be a demo or a talk? Is it a demo or a talk?
It's going to be a talk.
It's going to talk. Okay. All right.
Actually, my name is Hide Segusa. I'm affiliated with the University of Arizona, Indian Institute of Technology, Mandi, California Institute of Human Science. Today I want to talk about our team's 3 big findings. What we have found, finally found the neural correlate of consciousness, and we discovered the mechanism of a general anesthesia, and we have finally developed a consciousness meter, which everybody in this field were trying to make for many years. And this is actually my team. I'm working together with Dr. Stuart Hameroff and Dr. Roger Penrose, and I lived together with Dr. Stuart Hameroff for last 3 years, and I've been doing the research together with him from morning till night. So first, this is last year, I did an experiment with mice with Dr. Stuart Hameroff in University of Arizona. This is anesthetized mice. And this is the high frequency EEG machine. The signal is flat. And this is awake mice, and you can see the signals. And this was last year. And this year, I finally got the permission from Japanese hospital to do the experiment on the patient under general anesthesia. And this is still he was awake. And as soon as we injected the propofol, general anesthesia, it took 4 minutes, and the signal became completely flat. And after we cut the general anesthesia, it took 15 minutes. I have all the video. I don't have a time to show all the videos. It took 15 minutes from becoming flat to recover the regular EEG. So usually, this is a usual EEG machine. When you have consciousness, it is like this, like a beta wave. If you go under general anesthesia, it's going to be a delta wave, very slow kind of brain wave, so it doesn't become flat. Usual EEG doesn't become flat. But because of this high frequency EEG machine, we are measuring from 6 to 26 megahertz oscillations. And because of this oscillation, this brain signal is coming from the microtubules. And I will show you the time scale of all the frequencies. Yeah, regular brain waves is 1 to 100 hertz. And the information is coming from the neuron, and it's millisecond time scale. 1 megahertz is 1 million hertz, and the information is coming from microtubule, and the time scale is microseconds. And the gigahertz, it is coming from the microtubule, it's nanoseconds. If it's terahertz, it is also coming from microtubule and picosecond. And we could get the huge amount of data, the computation on these oscillations. And many scientists have discovered that they could download huge amount of information from the brain and trying to investigate what is these kind of microtubule computations. And we did the Morse experiment. This is inside a fairway cage in the University of California Institute of Human Science. The person who's shooting the video is Dr. Stuart Hamroff. And we check the plant. And we were able to detect the signal from the plants, and the location of the signal were only from the stems. Other places we tried on the apple, but we never get any data. Only here we could get the data. We could get the signals. And then we did the experiment with a dog. And we were able to get the signal from the dog. And then we did the experiment when I'm meditating. Because the consciousness scientists were speculating the meditation and awakening of samadhi is the expansion and deepening the consciousness. So this is a result of the deepening of the consciousness. And this is when I go into deep samadhi. When my breathing became 30 seconds of breath, I could go into these states. So the signal becomes very big. Usually, yesterday I displayed my skills of transmission of awakening. I could transmit my state of awakening to the few hundred people at once, and I display this always in a Science of Consciousness conference. And this is a video of the person who is receiving my transmission of awakening. So this, and yeah, we were doing studies with Stuart, and we did ultrasound stimulation of Stuart's brain. This, you will see the ultrasound machine. Yeah, this is an ultrasound machine. So you will see a lot of big spikes. And this is the megahertz oscillation. That means it is directly influencing, activating the microtubule. Because of the oscillation is megahertz, microtubule oscillation. So with all these experiments we did, the conclusion is a mechanism of general anesthesia. Propofol general anesthesia only dampened the quantum effect in the microtubule, because still neurons are rapidly moving, working, even after the general anesthesia. So scientists were wondering why only the consciousness disappears. So we finally found it was consciousness was emerging from the quantum effect inside the microtubule. So that means we have found neural correlate of consciousness. Consciousness emerges from the quantum effect. And because of the meditation experiment and samadhi experiment reinforces the evidence of these conclusions. But there was lots of pressure has been made. So I was forced to announce these kinds of big discoveries in this room. I wanted so many people to know our discoveries, but in a scientific field, sometimes so many things happens. When you do make a huge discoveries, sometimes some pressure comes and somebody wants to make it that it never happened. So this was in the Dr. Stuart Hameroff and Dr. Roger Penrose first academic paper. First one was normal experience. This was, they wrote this with a speculation. They didn't know that they were hoping that they will get the result of these. And I got the result of the A, normal experience. And I got the result of the B, anesthesia. I got the result of C, heightened experience. I got the result of D also, altered state. I haven't got the E yet, because the probe, it is very difficult to put the probe when somebody is in sleep. So only E I couldn't discover. But all of them I was able to discover. So is there any questions?
Do you have the consciousness meter?
Yeah, I have this machine with myself, and we're gonna do.
Are you going to do a demo during the conference?
I'm gonna do. I brought this machine, and Stuart told me to do the demo. Since last year, I've been using this machine and doing the demo. So demo is gonna be from the 7 p.m. onwards.
7 p.m. Okay. And where?
Where we have a demo room.
Demo room. Okay.
Demo.
All right. Okay. So any questions for Heidi about the meter? Yes. Couple of hands here.
This is rather a simple question.
Yes.
When you talk about a probe, it's just resting on the scalp. It's not going inside anywhere, is it?
It's not going inside.
Okay. I was a little nervous.
Yeah, can you talk about the can you talk about the sensor and its properties?
Yeah, sensor and property. Oh, this is a machine I will show you if you come to the demo, and you can try it yourself. How it works, and how it's like, how the probe is like.
Okay, I'll see you there then.
I think it's a high frequency cable connected to a spectrum analyzer.
There's one more question.
It's pretty much, I think, I've seen it, that's why I'm trying to comment. Okay.
Thank you very much for your talk. It's fascinating. Probably because I don't know much about this, but how How do you said it was demonstrating frequency of the microtubules? How do you know that that is the case?
How do you know this oscillation
Yeah.
coming from the microtubule?
Yes.
Because there's nothing else.
Okay. Thank you.
And we also have did a lot of experiment. My colleague have did a lot of experiment on microtubules and found out these kind of megahertz oscillation, gigahertz oscillation in the we have detected already, and my colleague have written the paper that these vibrations they detected from inside the microtubules. That's why I could say this is from microtubule.
One last. Any questions? Okay.
Yeah. So my question is, we are capturing the vibrations, oscillations in the probe. But how we correlate the vibrations or the oscillations with the consciousness?
How do you?
Yeah, why we are correlating two things?
Why do we are correlating?
Yes.
I didn't really get the question.
So he's asking that you're seeing these spikes on one side, and then you're saying it represents consciousness.
Yeah.
So he's asking why. I guess the answer is.
Answer is because of the oscillation, and we did a lot of experiment, and every time we were successful in detecting the consciousness, because this is a good example, under general anesthesia.
No, that's because of this anesthesia experiment. You give general anesthesia and we all experience there's no conscious experience and the curve goes flat. So that's the idea. And when you come out of general anesthesia, the spikes come up again. So that's like a correlation to, lived conscious experience. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. All right, let's give Heidi one more round of applause. Thank you. So, Ranjit Chaudhary. Ranjit Chaudhary is the last speaker in the session. So his talk is supposed to start at 7:05, so I'm going to give him 2 minutes. I'm not sure if he's on his way or something. And in the meantime, can I have your name? The person over there who asked the question? Yeah. No, behind. Yeah, your name, sorry. Morgan, yeah, thank you for asking that question during my talk. I realized one of my slides was hidden for some reason, probably a mistake on my side. And actually, I had the reference of Don Hoffman over there. So just for the sake of completeness and for the records, I want to show that slide, right, in my presentation. Because that's a very important reference that it didn't show up. Oh, it's hidden even now. How do you unhide it? Yeah, it's visible. Okay, so that's the Don Hoffman's reference. Yeah, sorry about that. I missed it somehow. Yes. Okay, I'm going to give 1 more minute. In the meantime, any questions, any thoughts, reflections on the session so far? Just, you can just speak up informally. Or any thoughts on the conference so far? Yeah. Oh, okay. Question for her. Yeah.
I don't really. I've got a poster tomorrow. I was wondering if you had time tomorrow to have a look at my poster, because it sounds very much. I've been working the last 20 odd years on transcendental phenomenology by Edmund Husserl. It starts with the experiential, ends with the intersubjectivity in the form of an archetype.
and I'd be really interested to hear your feedback and to see if it makes sense to you. So, thank you.
Yes. Yes, you have a hand. Yeah.
But yeah, maybe just trigger a question and a reflection on some of the comments that were made, and I'm starting to observe very similar things throughout the entire ecosystem. And just reading recently about the 24 plus models of what consciousness is by Kuhn and so on. So I come from a very different field. I'm a geneticist. I've spent my career building drug discovery, synthetic biology, and those kind of things, but very deep in cell biology and mitochondria, and just kind of as personal curiosity, I'm getting slightly into this space. There's a couple of comments that I have to reflect on one of these questions, consciousness versus awareness. So even bacteria are very much aware of their surrounding, hugely aware. We have chemotaxis, we have movement towards where the nutrients are, the lights are, and so on and so forth. That's huge awareness. The plants have huge awareness and so on. Whether we call that consciousness or not is a whole different thing, and whether we call that self-consciousness is a whole nother thing, right? So I do think that there is a gradation to those things, and I do think that there is one of those things resonates with me, that there is something that is consciousness about there is something about the awareness of maybe even a field that we're not fully able to kind of measure yet, gravity or whatever, right? But to translate the awareness into actual conscious experience, I think it takes a little bit more, right? That's kind of one thing that I'm reflecting, but I'm kind of astounded how many different views there are among so many different experts. The second part that I'm struggling, and please maybe help me out with that one, is that I'm seeing these very, very different styles of nothing is real, everything is, kind of, comes out of consciousness and so on. Then you have David Deutsch's like multiverse, everything exists and we're splitting up, like a quadrillion times per microsecond, across the entire cosmos and so on. And then I still am sort of naively in that space where I do think matter does exist, universe does exist. And I'm not sure I could say that atoms are conscious, but I could quite be willing to say that there is an experience even beyond when you look at like how the galaxies are formed and galactic clusters and so on and so forth. There could be something that is happening on the multi-million scale of awareness, and we are experiencing something on the microsecond scale of awareness. And so, but I would not dare to say that we're actually creating reality. I agree that reality that we perceive is an illusion because it's much more complex. We don't see the void, we don't see all those spectrums and so on. We reinterpret something that, in sort of Donald Hoffman style, we recreate something that we can perceive meaningfully, right? But it doesn't mean that the reality is not there materially, right? So, and again, I'm really apologies for the naivete because I'm kind of, for the first year exploring this space out of a very purely, kind of maybe boring scientific perspective of a geneticist. But anyway, these are my...
That's wonderful to hear. What's your name? NA.
Yes.
Okay. Well, let's give him a round of applause for being brave enough to, just present his thoughts in an unfiltered manner. I think that's very valuable. And a lot of us, maybe almost all of us go through this phase, and I personally have been through it. And still, it's like an ongoing journey, right? So I'm not going to answer or try to resolve the questions that you raised, but I just want to acknowledge that how deep and important those are. But I do see, please go ahead and comment.
I think this is just such an important observation in this situation of the science of consciousness. We're very, very fortunate to be in a space which, as was mentioned earlier, is multidisciplinary, which is open to very many new ideas, which is trying to deal with a kind of European-centric idea of philosophy and science and knowledge and which is actually open to seeing how other cultures, other traditions, knowledge, I won't say ancient knowledge, because I think often it's timeless knowledge. Knowledge is knowledge, you know, and it stays around, you know, and looking to see how those can inform the questions that we're asking, and even changing the type of questions we're asking. And it can be tough coming to these conferences and hearing so many different views, which you kind of go, how do I relate to that? How does that challenge me in my views? But that's honestly the beauty of this. Please don't expect to agree with everyone. None of us have got the full picture. We've all got just little bits of the puzzle, and we're trying to piece it together, and I want to see how you pieced your pieces together and whether that helps me work out my picture. So at the end of the week, we hope we've all gained just a little bit from this. But it's such an amazing journey to be on.
Thank you for that comment. Yeah, there are a couple more hands. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with your point. I attended last year's conference in Arizona, and this was a common problem that each individual expert had their own definition of consciousness. I think they even made different terms. Consciousness K, I saw some flyer about that. But I think in principle, or rather the main distinction between these theories is the difference between pure awareness and awareness of. I think that is the key issue here. And yeah, after you define awareness as something you're aware of, infinite different perspectives can manifest. So I would say yes, that each person has their own opinion and their own perspective, but I do believe that at the root there is an ultimate truth, which I think it's pure awareness without anything, period. A subset awareness. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, one takeaway for me I see is at least we are getting into a place where we are talking openly that consciousness is fundamental. I mean, all these years we were mainly, the idealism or the fundamental awareness was just taken as an afterthought, was not taken seriously. And that is one thing that I have understood, that a lot of people who have given talks, we have just kind of come to the conclusion that awareness is fundamental. That's one takeaway that I think I want to talk about. And yeah, talking about your point, definitely, I mean, the way I look at it is, I was trying to get the philosophical word for the model I have in my mind. I think what ChatGPT tells us, it's an interactive dual aspect realism. So whatever that means. But yes, one more ism. So I definitely believe that there is, we have awareness, field of awareness, or Brahman in what we call in Indian philosophy. There is some sort of, and obviously matter exists, and even based on the scientific study, we are just a predictive machine. So all of us predict the external world, and the way and the Brahman kind of experiences the prediction. The field of awareness on its own is supposed to be formless, shapeless. We can't even talk about it. There is nothing to even pull it down to words. It's the interaction, the result of it, the matter that structures the experience, gives it shape, that we can talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think, again, this brings us to the concept then of also the agency, right? Because there's the awareness, there's the consciousness, and there's the agency. And now you're saying, well, things happen anyway, right? The body, whatever, then we get to those like the free will part of the debate, right? But again, there's such a divide on those things, and now there is the free will and there is not the free will, and then you have the some point you become aware of those, but it doesn't mean that you didn't have an agency because your body was making those things. And, so it's kind of, you were, as this physical entity, were taking shape in that space. Well, the awareness came a bit later, but it doesn't mean that the awareness is not your agency as well, right? So I do think that the fact, you're right, the fact that there is an awareness, it means that this is a property of the material cosmos somehow, or a fundamental, let's say, field of the material cosmos. We just haven't figured out the right question of how to connect the two dots. But I wouldn't say it's the whole cosmos is not an emergent property. And all of you guys don't exist because I'm imagining you. So that somehow doesn't resonate. So I think what you said is kind of the last comment from mine. What I'm coming to, again, as a novice, to a field that was so dogmatic for millennia, is that there has to actually be these radical oppositions, like the supposed there's no free will, and then there's whatever is emergent, and there's whatever multiverse, and so on, because each one takes such a deep, let's say, insight into one angle of this, that as long as everybody is tolerant, and I've actually heard, unfortunately, quite a few non-tolerant comments by some of the leading thoughts, like, I don't know, Bernardo Castro saying, well, only idealism and everything else is nonsense. So each one, it's great that there are so many deep, let's say, explorations, because ultimately at some point humanity will figure out what's going on, hopefully. Well, we're skeptical. But anyway,
Yeah.
for most of the history, it's been very dogmatic. Like, there was only one type of thought that was
That's true. That's true. Yeah. So we are evolving in our journey as humanity, right? And then, yeah. So just want to inform you that the last talk is actually a no-show, but we have until 7:30, so we can continue the discussion, which I'm actually liking a lot. So so let's hear from gentlemen here, and then if anyone else, I'll pass on the mic. Yeah, go ahead.
I guess I just wanted to say that there is a beauty in the mystery as well, because we don't know, right? And we're dealing with these giant metaphysical questions that humanity has been grappling with since the beginning of time. And it's so great that we can all come together and share our own perspectives. And there is, for me, one of the most beautiful traits of humans is humility and the ability to admit when you might be wrong about something, and also to be open-minded, right? Which I think is probably an overarching quality of almost everyone here, which is why we all came to explore the different realms of consciousness, right? And, you know, I've always been this proponent, my motto in life is like, believe in everything and believe in nothing, because it allows you to have your brain explore all of the realms, you know, go down all of the different labyrinths that exist out there. And at the end of the day, it's like, I'm coming to this point in my life where I'm starting to realize, oh wait, there are actually paths though that resonate with me personally. Whether they're right or wrong, I mean, there's a lot of debate in both sides of what I may or may not believe in. But what works for you? Like, what helps you in your subjective experience on this world? Because at the end of the day, it's not that that's the only thing that matters, but when we're dealing with these difficult questions, I think that there does come a degree of like, okay, what's helpful not only for me, but also for other people? Like, what's going to actually bring some more love and empathy into this world and to yourself as well? But that's just like my own personal thoughts, and like coming to this conference as well, and listening to all of these different ideas and being like, why does any of this matter? Not that it doesn't matter. I mean, again, it does matter. These are questions I've been pondering on my whole life, right? But then again, like, okay, well, where does that leave me? But anyways, these are just.
That's great. What's your name?
Sienna.
Sienna? Okay, thank you, Sienna, for sharing those thoughts. Yeah, I mean, as long as we have an enriching experience at the end of the day, it's worth it. So I guess that's what we are experiencing at this conference. So let's give a new hand a chance. Yeah.
Yes, just listening to what people are saying, I'm just becoming more aware that, we're definitely coming from different reference points and different perspectives. Mine is an interest in psychoanalysis and the collective unconscious. And when you were telling the elephant story, I was thinking, well, if they could all tap into a collective unconscious, they would all have an idea of, what the elephant was like, because they'd put all their ideas together. And so on this first day, I'm sort of struggling with understanding the terminology of people who come from different perspectives, but it's really quite expanding, so I'm appreciating it. Thank you.
Okay, maybe second last, and then you had your hand up, right?
Yeah, one thing I just want to mention about is actually the free will concept. So I've been pondering over it for the last 7-8 years, and I feel initially free will has been rejected by a lot of physicalism and the scientists like Sam Harris and others. The reason being, initially the free will was associated with dualism. Whenever we spoke about free will, we always brought in external soul into picture and other things. And so to dismiss it, I think was a good idea. But it just comes down to the definition of free will, how we want to define free will, and then we can all agree on something. So what Sam Harris and others say is that it just happens intuitive. I mean, things are happening without your control, and once it happens, you're aware of it. So if you talk about free will as an immediate next step, like I want to watch this TV or something, then you're just reacting to your stimulus. There is no free will involved. But if you just kind of put it in a long-term decision making, then probably free will can have a more accepting thing. Like if you are making a decision like few days together or long-term decision making, that can be free will based. And a few other things about free will is, if I feel it's just a reflection of the natural state of the system. We are progressing from one state to another through genetics. We are just moving from one state to another, and there is an experience associated with it. If we allow that experience to go forward with like how it's happening, that can be considered free will. But if someone is forcing you to do something else, which is again a natural transitioning system, then there is no free will. So yeah, that's my full sense of it.
So let's have this last comment, and then we'll close the session.
Yeah, here in these last comments in the discussion, very interesting discussion. I like the elephant example, but I think this question of consciousness cannot really apply with. This question of consciousness is not like other scientific theories, because it's fundamental. It is of something that you can observe atoms in physics, you can observe cells. Consciousness is completely, is not even like in the same realm. It's something more inner So, and the issue of dogma and all these comments of relativism, yeah, it's beautiful, but what's the purpose of having a science if you don't have certainty? I think what we're all looking for here is certainty of, okay, this is it, and nothing else, can be. You want certainty in theory. So, and I do believe that the comments you made earlier, the Hindu tradition, and I believe you're also involved in that. I think they had a true understanding of what we're here trying to figure out, but they just had different concepts, language, that it might not translate to us. And that's, I think, what we're doing here, trying to translate in a way with concepts that we understand in modern science with ancient concepts.
I like the point, we're looking for certainty. And I think in the search for knowledge, we have to start from what is absolutely certain. I exist. I'm here. I'm feeling stuff. That's what we know for certain. Actually, our own consciousness. Now, we don't know much about our own consciousness, and we get into trouble with it all the time. We allow it to go up and we allow it to go down and make desires and follow things and get ourselves in messes and have to unpick a lot of stuff. But the fact that I am a conscious thing. Now, how do I go about that from this point on? That's our challenge. That's the fun of this week.
So I would just throw in, I 100% agree with this one. So we have self-evidence that there is something to be like us, right? But I would not dare to say that it's a completely different realm than the, let's say, physical, realism, because we were not aware of magnetism, space-time curvature, all these kind of things that we can now measure because science has evolved so much, but we used to think that the Earth is flat. And maybe, but certain birds, they can feel the magnetism, and they can almost probably feel it, oh, such a wonderful ride today over these kind of whatever, equatorial zones. So, and potentially the sun feels in space-time curvature because it doesn't feel the same neuronal networks, but feels, oh, there was an asteroid coming through this area, changed a little bit my solar environment and so on. Who knows? So I agree here, we are aware, and we know that there is something to be potentially curious about seeking. I also agree with a little bit with that naivete, like, maybe you don't need to always define everything, but if we go like there, I disagree that this is a whole new realm. There is just something we can't really figure out what are the properties, the tools, maybe we are, again, there are some concepts that maybe we're not just on the right dimension to actually measure those things because it comes from slightly more complex stories, but I just wouldn't dismiss it that this is something exotic and not related to, maybe a gravitational wave or something else.
Right.
But we can't feel either, right?
All right. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Maybe one-on-one we can have, we'll huddle outside and we'll have some more discussion. But let's bring this session to a close. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.